Lieutenant Minji was having another boring night shift at the Deep Space Monitoring Station Kepler-7. The station floated quietly in empty space, far from Earth, listening for any strange signals from the galaxy. Most nights, nothing happened. The machines beeped softly, and Minji would drink coffee and read reports. But tonight was different. Her screen suddenly lit up with activity. A signal was coming from the very edge of the galaxy, a place where no one lived. At first, it looked like random noise. Then Minji noticed something strange. The signal had patterns, mathematical patterns that any intelligent species would recognize. "Commander Seok, you really need to look at this right now," Minji called out, her voice shaking slightly. She had been working at space stations for 5 years, but she had never seen anything like this before. Commander Seok walked over, still holding his cup of tea. He was an older man who had seen many false alarms over the years. Usually, these strange signals turned out to be nothing important, maybe a broken satellite or some natural space phenomenon. But when he looked at Minji's screen, his face went pale. The signal was definitely artificial. Someone or something intelligent had sent this message. The patterns showed universal constants like pi and the speed of light. Any species that had discovered mathematics would understand these numbers. "Get Dr. Gina up here immediately," Seok ordered, pressing the emergency button on his desk. Dr. Gina arrived within minutes, still wearing her pajamas. She was the station's language expert, the person who tried to understand alien communications. She had studied every known alien language, but she had never worked on a real alien message before. This was what she had trained for her entire life. Gina sat down at the main computer and began working. Her fingers moved quickly across the keyboard as she ran the signal through different translation programs. The mathematics were easy to understand, but after the numbers came something else. Symbols that looked like writing. Hours passed. CO brought coffee and food, but Gina barely noticed. She was completely focused on solving this puzzle. The symbols seemed to follow logical patterns, like a real language. Then suddenly, the computer screen displayed words in English. Gina's hands began to shake as she read the translation out loud. "They are coming. We cannot stop them. Warn the others." The room fell silent. All 3 humans stared at the message. This was not some friendly greeting from a peaceful alien species. This was a warning. Someone out there was in terrible danger, and they were trying to warn everyone else in the galaxy. The signal kept repeating the same message over and over again. But each time it repeated, it got a little bit weaker. Either the transmitter was losing power, or whoever was sending the message was getting further away. Or worse, they might already be dead. Commander Seok immediately activated the emergency protocols. This message needed to reach Earth as fast as possible. Humanity was about to learn that they were not alone in the universe, and that something very dangerous was out there in the darkness of space. The message from space arrived at Earth's most secure facility within hours. The Seoul Defense Complex buzzed with activity as scientists and military officials gathered around massive computer screens. This underground bunker had been built to handle humanity's most dangerous secrets, but nothing had prepared them for this. Dr. Hyen had been woken up at 3 in the morning and rushed to the complex, as Earth's leading expert on alien languages. He knew this day might come eventually, but he had always imagined first contact would be different. Maybe a peaceful greeting or a simple hello from friendly neighbors. Not a desperate warning about something terrible heading their way. His team worked around the clock, using every computer program and translation method they had. The message was much longer than the initial distress call. Hidden within the signal were massive amounts of data about the sender's identity and history. When the computers finally decoded everything, the results shocked everyone in the room. The signal came from something called the Ethereal Collective, Hyen announced to the gathered officials. His voice was tired but filled with amazement. According to this data, they've been watching our galaxy for millions of years. Dr. Yu, who specialized in alien cultures, pulled up the decoded files on her screen. Her face went pale as she read through the information. "These beings are completely peaceful," she whispered, hardly believing what she was reading. "They've been observing thousands of different species as they developed. But they never interfered with anyone. They just watched and learned." This made the warning even more terrifying. If a species that had never hurt anyone was crying out for help, then whatever was threatening them had to be incredibly dangerous. The full translation revealed details that made everyone in the room feel sick with fear. The entities called the Devourers had somehow broken through from outside their galaxy. These creatures didn't just attack planets or even solar systems. They consumed everything completely, leaving behind empty space where entire civilizations used to exist. Dr. Doyan, who studied ancient alien civilizations, found the most frightening information buried deep in the message's hidden data. His job usually involved piecing together clues about species that had died out long ago. But this information was fresh and terrifying. According to these records, the Devourers have already completely destroyed 17 different civilizations, Doyan reported, his voice shaking. Billions and billions of intelligent beings, just gone, erased from existence. The room fell completely silent. Everyone tried to imagine entire worlds full of families, children, and dreams simply vanishing into nothingness. But the worst news was still coming. Doyan continued reading the data, and his face grew even more pale. The Ethereal Collective is the last major civilization between the Devourers and the main part of our galaxy. Once they're gone, there's nothing stopping these monsters from reaching Earth and every other inhabited world. Humanity had just learned they weren't alone in the universe. Unfortunately, they had also learned that something unimaginably evil was heading straight toward them. The emergency meeting of the Galactic Council was unlike anything in recorded history. Representatives from dozens of alien species gathered in the massive crystal chamber that floated in neutral space. Each species had their own section, with special atmosphere and gravity, controls to keep them comfortable during discussions. Ambassador Sahi sat in the human section, feeling very small and new compared to the ancient beings around her. Humanity had only been part of the galactic community for 20 years. Most of these other species had been traveling between stars for thousands or even millions of years. The warning message from the Ethereal Collective played on the main screen for everyone to see and hear. Translations appeared in hundreds of different languages as species after species absorbed the terrible news. The Devourers were coming, and they would destroy everything in their path. But instead of planning a defense, every single alien species said the same thing: run away, evacuate, retreat to the center of the galaxy, where it might be safer. The tall, blue-skinned Altarians spoke first. Their delegates stood up on 4 legs and made clicking sounds that the translators turned into words. "We must evacuate all populated worlds near the galactic rim. Our fleets will escort civilians toward the core worlds where the Devourers cannot reach us." The blob-like gelatinous confederation agreed. Retreat is wisdom. Fighting these entities would be suicide. We must preserve our cultures by fleeing. One by one, species that had survived for millions of years all chose the same strategy: run away and hope the Devourers would stop somewhere else. Ambassador Sahi couldn't believe what she was hearing. She stood up in her section and activated her speaking device. "The humans offer military assistance," she announced loudly. "We have warships and weapons that might be effective against these Devourers. We're willing to fight." The chamber erupted in sounds that the translators couldn't even convert properly. Clicks, buzzes, whistles, and roars filled the air as alien species reacted to humanity's offer, but none of the sounds were supportive. The Altarian delegate made a sound that clearly meant disgust. "Primitive warmongers," he sneered through the translator. "Humans have only been in space for a few decades, and already they think violence solves everything. Their aggressive nature blinds them to true wisdom. The correct response is to flee toward the core worlds where civilized beings can survive. Colonel Minho, who served as humanity's military representative, felt his hands clench into fists. He had fought in 3 wars to protect innocent people, and now these ancient aliens were calling him primitive for wanting to do the same thing on a galactic scale. The council took a formal vote. Every single non-human species voted to reject humanity's military assistance. They passed a resolution calling humans unnecessarily aggressive and recklessly militaristic. The final vote was recorded in the official record as a warning to future generations about human violent tendencies. Ambassador Sahi watched in horror as the galaxy's oldest and most advanced civilizations officially turned their backs on the Outer Rim. They were abandoning billions of younger species who didn't have fast enough ships to evacuate. Entire worlds, full of families and children, would be left behind to face the devourers alone. As the council's session ended, alien delegates filed out of the chamber, already making plans for their great retreat. None of them looked back at the human section, where 2 representatives sat in stunned silence, realizing that humanity might be the only species willing to stand and fight. The emergency meeting took place in the deepest bunker beneath the Pentagon. Admiral Junho walked slowly to the front of the room, his old uniform showing patches and scars from battles he had fought years ago. At 62, he had seen more wars than he wanted to remember, but this would be different from anything humanity had ever faced. Around the massive oak table sat 12 of Earth's top military leaders. These men and women had spent their entire careers preparing for conflicts they hoped would never come. Now they faced something that made their worst nightmares seem small. The Galactic Council has made their position clear, Admiral Junho began, his voice calm but filled with disappointment. They call us primitive. They say we're too violent, too aggressive, too quick to choose war over peace. He paused and looked around the room at faces he had known for decades. While they debate and retreat, billions of innocent beings will die. Entire civilizations will be wiped out completely, and they're okay with that because it means they get to survive. General Nayan, a tough woman who had commanded space forces for 15 years, activated the holographic display in the center of the table. Massive warships appeared in the air, rotating slowly so everyone could see their details. For the past 20 years, other species have criticized our military buildup, she said, pointing to the largest ships in the display. They said we were building too many weapons. They complained that humans were too focused on warfare instead of peaceful exploration. The ships floating in the hologram were impressive and terrifying. The Titan-class warships were enormous vessels, covered in weapons that could destroy entire fleets. Each ship carried enough firepower to level a small moon. The Altarians told us we should build exploration vessels and science ships instead, continued General Nayan. The Confederation said our military thinking was unnecessarily aggressive, and that civilized species didn't need such powerful weapons. Admiral Taeyan, the youngest person at the table at just 35, leaned back in his chair with a dark smile. He had always been the most direct speaker among the military leadership. Well, maybe our primitive aggression is exactly what this galaxy needs right now, he said. Those ancient civilizations, with all their wisdom and experience, are running away with their tails between their legs. Meanwhile, the young, dumb, violent humans are the only ones willing to stand up and fight. The room fell quiet as everyone absorbed the situation. Humanity had always been seen as the newcomers, the species that asked too many questions and built too many weapons. Now, they were the only hope for billions of innocent lives. Admiral Junho called for a vote, all in favor of deploying our fleets to engage the devourers. Every hand in the room went up immediately. There was no discussion, number debate, no second thoughts. The decision was unanimous. Humanity would stand and fight, even if they had to do it alone, even if the entire galaxy thought they were crazy. even if it meant the end of human civilization, because that's what humans did. They protected the innocent, even when no one else would. Captain Yunji stood on the bridge of the UES Indomitable, staring out at the most incredible sight of her military career. Through the massive viewing window, she watched as humanity's most powerful warships slowly moved into position around their rally point near Jupiter's orbit. Each ship that arrived made her feel a mix of pride and worry. These weren't the sleek, beautiful vessels that other alien species built for exploration and peaceful contact. Human warships looked exactly like what they were designed for: war. They were covered in armor plating, weapon batteries, and sensor arrays that could track enemies across entire star systems. "Captain, the EU's Ragnarok is taking position on our starboard side," reported Lieutenant Commander Park from his station. Yanji nodded as she watched the massive ship move into formation. The Ragnarok was Captain Jinwoo's command, and it was unlike any other vessel in human space. While most ships carried traditional weapons like missiles and energy cannons, the Ragnarok specialized in something much more dangerous. Its quantum weapons could literally tear holes in reality itself. "Those weapons make me nervous even when they're on our side," muttered Chief Engineer Rodriguez, a man who had helped design some of humanity's most advanced technology. The UES Last Stand arrived next, its dark hull reflecting the light from distant stars. Captain Hannah's ship carried experimental dimensional disruptors that could theoretically affect things that existed in multiple dimensions at once. The weapons had never been tested in real combat, but against enemies like the Devourers, humanity needed every advantage they could get. Dr. Sunho worked frantically in the research section of the Indomitable, coordinating with science teams on every ship in the fleet. His job was to modify their weapons based on everything they had learned about the Devourers from the Ethereal Collective's message. "We're basically trying to fight ghosts," Sunho explained to Captain Yunji during a brief meeting. "These entities exist partially in our dimension and partially somewhere else. Normal weapons pass right through them most of the time. So what's the solution?" Yunji asked, though she was afraid she already knew the answer. "We overload everything," Sunho replied with a tired smile. "More power, more energy, more destructive force than any sane species would ever use. We're going to hit them with so much raw energy that even their dimensional shifting won't protect them." As more ships arrived, the scope of humanity's response became clear. 300 vessels formed the largest military fleet in human history. Each ship represented years of construction, billions of dollars in resources, and the skills of humanity's best engineers and scientists. Other alien species had criticized these ships when they were being built. The peaceful Altarians called them monuments to human aggression. The wise Confederation declared them proof that humans solve problems through violence. But now, as the fleet prepared to face an enemy that had destroyed 17 civilizations, those weapons didn't seem excessive anymore. They seemed necessary. Captain Yunji watched the final ships take their positions and felt a strange calm settle over her. Humanity was about to face the unknown, armed with weapons that civilized species refused to build, and a determination that ancient wisdom couldn't understand. Sometimes, overwhelming firepower really was the only answer to an impossible problem. The human fleet reached the coordinates exactly 72 hours after leaving Earth's solar system. Captain June stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching his sensors carefully as they approached the edge of known space. This was further from home than any human had ever traveled before. "Contact," shouted Lieutenant Minjae from his sensor station. Multiple unknown vessels detected, bearing 27 Mark IV. Captain Ji-yoon felt his heart rate increase as the first images appeared on the main screen. The Devourer scout ships looked nothing like any vessel humanity had ever seen. They seemed to shimmer and fade, sometimes appearing solid and sometimes becoming almost transparent, like ghosts. Analysis. Lieutenant Ji-yoon ordered, trying to keep his voice calm even though he knew they were looking at humanity's first alien enemies. Min-jae worked frantically at his controls, running every scan the ship's computers could perform. What? He discovered, made his blood run cold. Sir, they're phasing in and out of our dimension. 1 second they're completely solid, the next second they're like they don't really exist in our universe. Across the fleet, other captains reported the same strange readings. The Devourer ships seemed to exist in multiple realities at once, shifting between dimensions in ways that human science barely understood. Conventional weapons are passing right through them when they're in their phased state, reported the weapons officer on the EU's Thunderbolt. It's like trying to shoot at shadows. The Devourers had done this dance thousands of times before with countless other species. They would appear, terrify their prey with displays of impossible technology, and then watch as civilizations fled, in panic. Easy hunting. Simple consumption. But something was wrong this time. Instead of turning around and running away, the human ships were moving closer. The small, primitive vessels were actually charging directly toward them. Captain Yoonji aboard the Indomitable received readings from all the ships in her battle group. The Devourers seemed confused by humanity's approach. They had never encountered prey that moved toward them instead of away. Weapons Officer Yoonwoo, are the quantum torpedoes ready? Captain Yoonji asked. Yoonwoo checked his instruments one final time. These weapons had never been fired in combat before. The theoretical calculations suggested they would work against dimensional entities, but theory and reality were often very different things. Quantum torpedoes armed and ready, Captain. But I have to warn you, we're pushing these weapons far beyond their safe operating limits. If this doesn't work, we might tear holes in space-time that we can't control. Fire, UNG ordered without hesitation. The experimental torpedo launched from the Indomitable's forward tubes, its overloaded warhead containing enough energy to power a small city. As it approached the nearest Devourer scout, the weapon created something that had never existed before in this part of the galaxy. A localized tear in reality itself. The Devourer ship, caught mid-phase between dimensions, suddenly found itself trapped in the reality tier, for the first time in millions of years. One of their vessels was completely vulnerable. The scout ship's destruction was unlike anything the humans had ever witnessed. It didn't just explode or break apart. It screamed across every communication frequency as it was literally torn apart by conflicting physical laws from multiple dimensions. The remaining Devourer scouts stopped their advance immediately. For the first time in their species-long history of conquest, they had encountered prey that could actually hurt them. The hunt had suddenly become a real fight. The main Devourer fleet arrived at the edge of human space like a storm of living darkness. Hundreds of massive vessels emerged from whatever dimension they called home, each one larger than humanity's biggest warships. They had come expecting another easy meal, another civilization that would flee in terror at the first sight of their power. Commander Johan watched the enemy fleet approach from his command ship, the UES Relentless. Around him, his battle group of 30 human vessels looked tiny compared to the massive alien force. But Johan had spent his entire career fighting against impossible odds, and he knew that sometimes the smaller force could win if they were willing to do things the bigger force wouldn't expect. All ships, prepare for unconventional warfare protocols, Johan transmitted to his fleet. We're going to show these things what happens when they mess with humans. The Devourers expected their enemies to maintain careful distances and fight with precise, civilized tactics, like every other species they had encountered. Instead, the human ships immediately charged straight into the enemy formation at maximum speed. Captain Sujin commanded a squadron of smaller, faster ships designed for hit-and-run attacks. Her 3 vessels, the UES Lightning, UES Thunder, and UES Storm, carried a special cargo that would have horrified the peaceful alien species of the Galactic Council. Nuclear mines, armed and ready, reported her weapons officer. But Captain, we'll have to get extremely close to their ships to plant these effectively. Sujin looked at her crew, young men and women who had volunteered for what they all knew was likely a suicide mission. We knew this job was dangerous when we signed up. Let's make sure our sacrifice counts. Her 3 ships dove into the heart of the Devourer formation, enemy fire lighting up their shields as they pushed forward. The lightning and thunder were destroyed within minutes, but they had done their job. Nuclear mines, each one powerful enough to crack a moon, were now scattered throughout the enemy fleet. When the mines detonated simultaneously, something unexpected happened. The massive nuclear explosions didn't just destroy nearby Devourer ships. They created what human scientists called reality cascades, chain reactions, that rippled through multiple dimensions at once. Several Devourer vessels found themselves suddenly trapped in normal space, unable to phase back to their safe dimension. For the first time in the battle, they were completely vulnerable to conventional human weapons. But the real turning point came when Captain Kyung, aboard the U.S. Valiant, saw an opportunity that would change everything. The largest Devourer ship, clearly their command vessel, had moved close to the battle to direct their forces. All power to engines, Kyung ordered his crew, and prepare to detonate the micro-black hole generator on my command. His crew stared at him in shock. The micro-black hole generator was an experimental weapon that had never been tested. Detonating it would destroy everything within several thousand kilometers, including their own ship. Sir, that's a suicide run, his first officer said quietly. No, Kyung replied. But if we take out their command ship, the rest of their fleet might retreat. Sometimes one life can save billions. The U.S. Valiant accelerated toward the Devourer flagship, its engines pushed far beyond safe limits. Enemy weapons tore through its armor, but the ship kept flying straight toward its target. Kyung's final transmission echoed across every human. Ship in the battle, never retreat, never surrender. For Earth, for humanity, for everyone they would have killed. The collision between the U.S. Valiant and the Devourer command ship created an explosion unlike anything ever seen in this galaxy. The micro-black hole generator collapsed local space-time itself, creating a gravitational anomaly that pulled the enemy flagship and dozens of surrounding vessels into a dimension where nothing could survive. When the light faded, half the Devourer fleet was simply gone. Commander Wonho sat in the darkened communications center of the UES Observer, surrounded by screens showing transmissions from across the galaxy. His ship stayed far from the main battle, using advanced listening equipment to monitor what other alien species were saying about humanity's fight against the Devourers. What he heard amazed him. The humans are actually hurting them, came a transmission from an Altarian observation post. Their primitive weapons are somehow affecting beings that our most advanced technology cannot even touch. Another message, this one from a Confederation science vessel, carried notes of disbelief. Impossible. The Devourers have never been stopped before. How are these young, aggressive creatures succeeding where ancient civilizations have failed? Wonho smiled grimly as he listened to species that had called humanity barbaric, now watching in awe as human tactics actually worked. The same primitive aggression they had criticized was now the galaxy's only hope. Then something unprecedented happened. A new transmission came through on the emergency diplomatic channel, using encryption codes that were millions of years old. "This is Elder Siwan of the Ethereal Collective," the voice said, speaking directly to the human fleet. "We have watched civilizations rise and fall for eons, but we have never interfered in galactic conflicts. Today, we break that ancient vow." The message that followed contained detailed information about Devourer weaknesses that no other species had ever discovered. Structural flaws in their dimensional technology, frequencies that disrupted their phasing abilities, and energy patterns that could force them to remain in normal space. "Why are they helping us?" asked Lieutenant Kim from his monitoring station. Because we're the first species crazy enough to actually fight back, Wanho replied, forwarding the intelligence data to Admiral Jejin's flagship. As the battle continued, more surprising messages arrived. The peaceful harmony singers, who had fled toward the galactic core, quietly transmitted the locations of supply depots. The Crystalline Confederacy, despite their official neutrality, began sharing advanced shield technology through encrypted channels. None of these species would admit publicly that they were helping the barbaric humans, but privately, they began to hope that maybe these violent newcomers could do what no one else had managed: stop the unstoppable. Admiral Jaeon received these secret transmissions aboard his flagship, the UES Determination, as the second wave of human reinforcements arrived from Earth. More ships, more weapons, more stubborn humans who refused to accept that some fights couldn't be won. All ships, this is Admiral Jaeon, he transmitted to the entire human fleet. The enemy expected us to run away like every other species they've encountered. They thought we would see their power and flee toward the galactic core like civilized beings. He paused, watching as human ships continued their relentless assault against enemies that had never been challenged before. But humans don't abandon innocent people to monsters. We don't calculate odds and decide some lives aren't worth saving. When evil comes for the helpless, we stand between them and harm, no matter the cost. The Devourers, for the first time in their millions of years of existence, found themselves facing something they had never encountered, an enemy that became more dangerous the more desperate the situation became. Every time they destroyed a human ship, the remaining vessels fought even harder. This was completely outside their experience. Every other species became weaker and more frightened as losses mounted. Humans seemed to draw strength from their fallen comrades, fighting with increasing fury as their friends died around them. The Devourer advance, which had swept across the galaxy without pause for eons, suddenly ground to a complete halt. They had finally met an enemy that simply would not give up. The moment that changed galactic history forever came, not with a massive explosion, but with a simple transmission received aboard the human flagship UES Determination. Fleet Admiral Gia, recently promoted after the previous admiral died in the final assault, stared at the message on his screen with disbelief. "Sir, you need to see this," his communications officer said, her voice shaking with excitement. "It's from the Devourer fleet." The message was short and transmitted in broken galactic standard language. "We withdraw. Your species, unexpected. We return beyond the barrier. Do not follow." For the first time in recorded history, the Devourers were retreating. The unstoppable force that had consumed 17 civilizations was running away from humanity. Admiral Guillaume looked around his bridge at crew members who had been fighting for 72 hours straight. Many of them were injured, all of them were exhausted, but every face showed the same expression of amazed triumph. "Send a message to Earth," Guillaume ordered. "Tell them the Devourers are withdrawing beyond the galactic barrier. The threat is over." But the real surprise came 3 days later, when Elder Yuri, of the Ethereal Collective, requested a personal meeting. The ancient being's ship, a vessel of pure energy and light, approached the human fleet slowly and peacefully. Elder Yuri materialized on the bridge of the Determination as a shimmering figure that seemed to be made of starlight itself. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of millions of years of accumulated knowledge. "Young warriors of Earth," she began, her words translating automatically into human languages, "we have observed civilizations rise and fall for longer than your species has existed. We have seen empires that spanned thousands of worlds, beings with technology that could reshape reality itself." She paused, and somehow Admiral Guillaume could feel her ancient eyes studying him carefully. "But you have accomplished something we believed was impossible. You made the Devourers afraid. In all our long watching, we have never seen them retreat from any enemy." The admission sent waves of pride through the human crew. These ancient, Wise beings who had seen everything the galaxy had to offer were impressed by humanity's achievement. But the biggest shock came when the Galactic Council, the same organization that had called humans primitive and aggressive, sent a formal delegation to meet with the human fleet. Ambassador Ji-hoon, who had watched the council abandon entire civilizations to die, received the alien diplomats aboard a human space station with barely hidden contempt. The same species that had fled toward the galactic core now wanted to discuss humanity's new role in galactic affairs. The council formally requests that humanity accept designation as a protector species, announced the Altarian delegate. The same being who had called humans warmongers just weeks before. Your unique approach to conflict resolution has proven valuable. Ambassador Ji-hoon listened to their flowery diplomatic language about humanity's surprising effectiveness and unexpected strategic capabilities. When they finished their presentation, he responded with words that would be remembered for generations. "You abandoned billions of innocent people to die," he said coldly, his voice carrying no warmth whatsoever. "While entire species faced extinction, you ran away and hid in the galactic core. Now that the danger is over, you want us to join your little club and pretend everything is fine." The alien delegates shifted uncomfortably as Ji-hoon continued. "We'll consider your offer, but understand this completely. We're keeping our weapons, we're keeping our military, and we're keeping our primitive, aggressive ways. Because apparently, sometimes the most civilized response to evil is to be absolutely, ruthlessly uncivilized right back." In the months that followed, human patrol ships took up positions along the galactic rim, standing guard against any possible return of the Devourers. The galaxy's youngest spacefaring species had become its primary defenders. Not through ancient wisdom or advanced technology, but through simple, stubborn courage. The distress signal that had started everything was finally answered, not by the galaxy's oldest and most advanced civilizations, but by the species everyone had dismissed as too young and too violent to matter. Sometimes, it turned out, being young and violent was exactly what the universe needed.